The cafeteria went silent except for the cruel laughter that echoed through the walls. On the cold, sticky floor, Clara Hayes, quiet, barefoot, and trembling, was on her hands and knees crawling as the boys barked at her. "Go on, farm girl. Crawl like the mutt you are," sneered Mason Clay, heir to the Clay fortune, whose family's empire spanned agribusiness, retail chains, and luxury brands worth over $330 million. Clara's cheeks burned crimson, but she bit her tongue. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not break. She knew if she fought back in that moment, they would only make it worse. The laughter of her classmates seared into her memory, becoming the sound that would fuel her fire. No one in that cafeteria knew the humiliation that day was not the end of Clara's story. It was the beginning. Clara had grown up on a small farm at the edge of town, where mornings began with milking cows before dawn and evenings ended with her helping her father repair worn-out machinery. They never had much, but what they did have was pride, integrity, and an unshakable work ethic. Clara was quiet not because she was weak, but because she had been raised to listen more than she spoke. The bullying had started when Mason discovered that Clara's family farm supplied milk to local markets, while his family owned massive industrial operations that were swallowing smaller farmers whole. To him, Clara was nothing but a target, a symbol of poverty and smallness compared to his empire. But Mason made a fatal mistake. He thought he was humiliating a powerless girl. What he didn't realize was that Clara had been quietly learning, working, and watching. Her father had taught her not only how to run a farm, but also how to negotiate contracts, study markets, and understand where the cracks in the system lay. That night, after she wiped away the sting of humiliation, she sat at the old wooden desk in her room and pulled out her laptop. She wasn't going to take revenge with fists or words. She was going to take it with knowledge. Clara began digging into the Clay family empire. The more she read, the more she realized that Mason's father had built his fortune by cutting corners, mistreating workers, and crushing smaller farms like her own. Clara recognized names of farmers who had lost everything, friends of her family, neighbors, people who had wept at community meetings about debts they couldn't repay. She collected documents, screenshots, and public records, piecing together a puzzle. Every late night she studied, her humiliation burned hotter into determination. Mason had mocked her like a dog, but she was sharpening her teeth. Her opportunity came when she overheard Mason bragging in class about his father's next big move. He didn't know Clara was listening. Head bent over her notebook as though she were invisible. He mentioned a secret deal, a merger that would make their company untouchable. Clara dug deeper and discovered something explosive. The Clay Empire had been hiding evidence of environmental violations, dumping toxic waste into local rivers that supplied towns with drinking water. It was buried in reports, hidden by bribes, and ignored by the media. But Clara had everything she needed to expose it. The next challenge was courage. Clara was only 17. She was just one girl with a laptop against billion-dollar lawyers and corporations. Fear whispered to her, what if they came after her family? What if no one believed her? But then she remembered the cafeteria, Mason's laughter, and the sting of her knees scraping the dirty floor. That humiliation had stripped away her fear. She refused to let her silence be her cage any longer. She gathered her evidence and sent it to investigative journalists, environmental watchdogs, and even regulatory agencies. At first, no one responded. Days went by with silence. Clara nearly lost hope until one evening, a reporter called. "This is explosive," the woman said, her voice steady. "If this is real, you may have just toppled one of the biggest corporations in the country." Within weeks, the story broke. Headlines screamed about the Clay Empire's corruption, environmental crimes, and financial fraud. Stock prices plummeted overnight. Workers walked out in protest. Lawsuits flooded in. Mason's father, once untouchable, was summoned to court. In a matter of months, the empire that had stood towering and unshakable for decades collapsed into dust. Over $330 million in value was gone, evaporated because a quiet farm girl had refused to stay silent. When Clara walked into the cafeteria the next day, the whispers were deafening. Students who had once laughed now looked at her with awe and shame. Mason sat slumped at a table, eyes hollow, his arrogance stripped bare. Clara didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She simply walked past him head high, and for the first time, no one dared to mock her. Clara's family farm not only survived but thrived. With the fall of the Clay Empire, small farms regained their strength. Local markets flourished, and justice rippled through the community. Clara went on to speak at schools, telling her story not of revenge, but of resilience. They wanted me to crawl like a dog, she told the students, her voice calm and steady, but I chose to rise. And rising is something no one can take from you. Her story became more than just the fall of a corrupt empire. It became a reminder that silence is not weakness, that humility is not submission, and that sometimes the quietest voices carry the most thunder.